Africa Prime, brought to you by Jamison's Select Reserve.
A large percentage of the world's fastest growing economies are on the African continent. Perceptions of Africa are changing rapidly, and so too are the experiences at a grassroots level. But can Africa maintain its positive momentum? Joining us now for insights into the fate of Africa going forward is South African Minister in the Presidency, Trevor Manuel. Minister, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you on the program. Here we are at COP17 in Durban. It's the first time the conference of the parties have met on African soil. What does this mean with regards to the changes of perceptions towards Africa, a continent once viewed as dark?
At one level, the perceptions have changed. I referred to the Economist magazine. In July 2007, they in fact ran a lead story with a horrible cover that said Africa, the Dark Continent. The edition of the 3rd of December 2011 has a young kid, African kid, running with a big kite in the rainbow colors, and it speaks to the continent of hope. So perceptions have changed, and those perceptions have changed partly because of constant decision making on the continent, but also because between the first headline they ran and the present, a few things have happened. Lehman Brothers, subprime crisis, the European crisis, the inability of the Northern Hemisphere to take decisions, and Africa has maintained a path, and as that article reflects, African growth, Pan-African growth this year is estimated to come in at 6%, and another 6% is slated for 2012. And into the future, there's a lot of growth, and it's not just a resources story, it's also because a number of other things are taking place. In fact, as you have the impact of climate change, there's also a lot of climate proofing taking place, and infrastructure is a fundamentally important part of that. So there will be a lot of growth out of the continent. The African Union, in fact, forecasts that there'll be about $150 billion a year of foreign direct investment onto the African continent from 2015. So it's actually quite a positive story right now, and it's that we have to build on to leverage new opportunities for the continent.
There are many regional bodies that have been created to ensure that there is regional integration that is occurring, and to ensure that there is strong economic growth. And to name a few, SADC, COMESA, we've got economies as well, the East African Community has been established. Do you think that these bodies have done enough and have fulfilled their mandates with regards to economic growth?
I'm going to be rude and say not nearly enough. I'm passionate about the need for the regional economic communities. I think that sometimes the people who run these organizations were poorly served by leadership. We've had crises all of our own making. In 2007, we should have, as Africans, taken a big decision to decide on the regional economic communities and how they go forward. We were distracted into United States of Africa debate. Now we can recover from it, but it did distract from the main issue. And the main issue for us as Africans is that we must be able to enlarge regional economic cooperation. We must ensure that we can soften the borders between countries. We must develop a higher level of intra-African trade. And we must not focus our trade only on relations with non-African countries. In fact, as a region, intra-African trade is at an abysmal low of around 11%. But South Africa's trade with the rest of the continent is actually at 24.2%. So we stand out as a country that recognizes the enormous potential of the rest of the continent. But now we have to be involved in ensuring that there's a decision making. The regional economic community is important because we need to link the regions differently. Our infrastructure on the continent has not been designed to actually facilitate trade with our neighbors. It's been designed in the main to take mineral resources to the ports. And this infrastructure, I think, that now needs to go in. It's part of climate proofing. You know, a study by the consultancy McKinsey says that 60% of the world's arable but uncultivated land is on the African continent. Now, if we can cultivate, we will in fact provide food security to the rest of the world. But if we want that food security, it's not just the land, it's also ensuring that you have the roads to be able to get the inputs into agriculture and the product to market. But between the field and the market, you need to ensure that there's cold storage and packaging and all of those things. And if we want that, then that infrastructure investment becomes fundamentally important.
Minister, some say that the strong economic growth that Africa is experiencing at this point could be a false dawn, just as before, because we have experienced strong economic growth and that has then been followed by immense weakness. Do you think that this is a false dawn for Africa?
Look, the issue of growth coming off is not an African issue. Try Europe, try Japan. Look even at China right now, where there's a lot of labor unrest because growth has come off and people are being displaced from work. Look at the data in the United States for unemployment and just how growth is almost sticking to the zero line. So it's not a purely African problem, but I think that the issue of leadership is fundamentally important. I think that you know, there are some lessons that have been well learned. One of those is that there's been no country or region that has grown in an environment of macroeconomic imbalances. So ensuring that those balances are there has been very much part of the African story over the past decade at least. Some of these lessons were hard learned, but I think they've been well learned. And you know, to a great extent, African countries try and maintain the macroeconomic balances. But that's not enough. You need solid micro policies to create jobs and ensure that prices work, that markets allocate resources, that governments deliver services as well. And this is frequently where we come apart, because the issue of leadership is frequently something that tends to be of short duration. But the challenge is that we need leaders who can take a long view on issues, who can engage with people differently. You know, I'm not a pessimist. I think that a lot of these lessons are actually being learned, and some of them have been learned the hard way through structural adjustment and so on. But I think the continent's in a better position now.
Would you say that there is a lacking of skill, not only on the ground, but across the value chain, even to the top, at the very high ends of government?
You know, if you look at Europe, for instance, I mean, just pause for a moment and consider the fact that 2 EU member states have had all elected politicians removed from office and replaced by technicians. Now that doesn't say a lot about democracy. I don't know how this issue resolves itself. I don't know how in these countries you will actually be able to take technicians out of play. I don't know how technicians implement policies that they weren't part of making. These are enormously difficult issues to deal with, but it's a reality of the world that we live in. In some other areas, I mean, you know, on the global arena in respect of the huge global imbalances, we've been talking about this for a long time, but leadership had hoped that by deferring the tough decisions, the problem would go away. Now we've seen that the problems haven't disappeared. They're very much with us. In fact, part of what we're living through is a consequence of the fact that we didn't take the tough decisions when we had to.
In Europe, we have, of course, seen coordinated action by central banks. We've seen austerity measures being implemented and then stimulus coming to the fore. We've also seen dramatic changes happening in the US with regards to Operation Twist and quantitative easing. Would you say that the choices that have been taken over the past few years since the economic crisis have been the right ones? And what would you have done in that position?
If I look at any of the central banks, whether you're looking at the Fed in the US or the ECB, some of the challenges that now arise are not a consequence of last month's decisions or last year's decisions. A lot of these things are long run, they feed through into the process differently. And so, you know, it's the quality of decision making that always arises. But it's also the way in which monetary and fiscal policy is coordinated. I mean, big challenge in the European Union is in many respects less about the monetary policy decisions taken by the ECB since its establishment than the fact that you haven't had the alignment of fiscal policies. And that, I think, is a challenge that still is there, and I'm not quite sure how it will disappear. But these issues, I think, say to us that they don't just disappear. The solutions are not in-country solutions, and for purposes of this question, for me, Europe, in the context of what we're talking about, because of monetary union, is a country. The only solutions are going to come when leaders can sit down across the globe and find global solutions. This was what happened in 1944 in New Hampshire, when leaders deployed and said, we need a different set of decisions. And the world is at a similar point. I think that what we must understand is that the economic model that is in operation now has failed, that it's a wreck, and you write off wrecks. You can't continue to panel beat things that won't ever run again. And so, you know, I think that we need leadership empowered and emboldened by the electorate to not only look at the issues within the country but across the globe. And this is going to require some nerve on the part of leadership, individuals to be able to turn to the electorates and say, we need a different set of decisions in the world right now. You've got to empower us to take those decisions. It's the only way that we will solve the problems of a world that is joined up but very broken.
Minister, we have to leave it there for just a bit. More with South African Minister in the Presidency, Trevor Manuel, right after the short break. Don't go anywhere.